My dad tried to sell my dog for $200 while I was at work, then told me, "You live in my house, so everything in it is mine, including that mutt." When I said he had no right, he rolled his eyes and said, "You're abandoning your family for a dog?" I just kept packing. That was 10 months ago. This morning, he was screaming my name as bailiffs dragged him out of court. My father tried to sell my dog while I was at work, so I moved out and took everything I owned. I've always had a complicated relationship with my dad. To be blunt, he's selfish, controlling, and has a history of acting like my belongings and my life are his to manage. Ever since I was a kid, he treated me less like his child and more like an inconvenience. When I was 8, he donated my bike to his friend's kid without even asking me. His excuse? "You weren't riding it enough." The truth was, I rode it every day until he gave it away. When I cried about it, he told me, "Stop being dramatic. You'll get over it." At 12, he sold my gaming console and all my games for a fraction of their value because he wanted beer money for a weekend trip with his buddies. He justified it by saying video games were rotting my brain and I should be grateful he was helping me. When I got my first job at 16, he constantly borrowed money from me without paying it back. If I confronted him, he twisted into me being ungrateful and selfish for not wanting to help my own father. As an adult, things didn't get much better. I moved back in with my parents temporarily after a breakup to save money. I paid rent, bought my own groceries, and even chipped in for utilities, but my dad still acted like he owned everything in my room. If I got a package delivered, he'd open it without asking. If friends dropped by, he'd snoop in my stuff, pretending he was looking for the remote. Now, I've always been a dog lover, and my current dog, Max, is the most important thing in my life. He's a rescue, half Labrador, half chaos, and I've had him for 4 years. He's helped me through depression, heartbreak, and stress. My dad always pretended to like him, but I caught little comments, "Dogs are too much trouble," or "He's a waste of money." I never thought he'd actually act on it. I was wrong. One afternoon, I came home from work, and Max wasn't there to greet me. He's always waiting by the door. My dad was sitting in the living room, acting like nothing was wrong. I asked where Max was, and he casually said, "Oh, a guy came by earlier. I told him we'd sell the dog for $200. He'll be back tonight with the cash." I froze. I honestly thought he was joking, but the smirk on his face told me otherwise. My chest felt like it was going to explode. I demanded to know what he meant, and he shrugged, saying, "You're at work all day. The dog needs someone who can actually give him attention. Plus, think about the money." I told him he had no right to do that. It wasn't his dog. He rolled his eyes and hit me with, "You live in my house, so everything in it is mine, including that mutt." That was it. I saw red. I grabbed Max's leash, went into my room, and started packing. My dad followed me, ranting about how I was being immature and overreacting over just a dog. He even tried to block my door at one point, saying I couldn't just leave without giving proper notice. I ignored him, called a friend, and asked if I could crash at her place for a bit. While I waited for her to come, I systematically packed every single item I owned: furniture, clothes, electronics, kitchenware, everything I had brought into that house. My dad kept yelling, saying things like, "You're abandoning your family for a dog? No wonder your relationships never work out. You're too attached to useless things. You'll be back in a week when you realize you can't make it without me." The gaslighting was exhausting. He kept trying to twist it into me being ungrateful, irresponsible, and dramatic, but I kept packing. When my friend arrived, I loaded everything into her truck and my car. The last thing I took was Max, who had been glued to my side the entire time, tail low and ears back. My dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, glaring. Before I left, I turned to him and said, "You'll never see Max again, and you'll never get a cent from me again." He started yelling as I shut the door behind me, but I didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, I made sure my dad couldn't use me as his personal ATM anymore. I blocked him on everything. I stopped sending money. And since I'd been helping with groceries and utilities, my mom, who enables him but isn't as openly cruel, had to cover the shortfall herself, something she wasn't thrilled about. For a while, I thought I was finally free. Then, last Friday, I got a letter in the mail. Apparently my dad is suing me for stealing his property. I stared at the envelope for a good 10 minutes before opening it, my hands already starting to shake. The legal papers inside were thick, official looking, with my dad's name right there as the plaintiff and mine as the defendant. I sat down on Jessica's spare bed and started reading through all the legal talk, trying to make sense of what Frank was actually claiming. He wasn't just saying Max belonged to him because the dog lived in his house. The document listed everything I took when I moved out: my TV, my laptop, my coffee maker, even the kitchen stuff I bought with my own money over the years, claiming it was all stolen property worth $8,000 total. My stomach dropped as I kept reading. Jessica must have heard me cursing because she came in with 2 cups of tea and sat down next to me. She read over my shoulder, and her face went white when she saw the dollar amount. "You need a lawyer," she said. I told her I couldn't afford one since the sudden move had wiped out most of my savings. The next morning at work, I could barely focus on anything. Max was sleeping under my desk, something my supervisor Linda had let me do after I explained why I suddenly needed to bring my dog to the office. Linda stopped by for our usual morning check-in and immediately noticed something was wrong. I showed her the lawsuit papers during lunch and explained the whole situation. She thought for a minute, then mentioned her brother-in-law Marcus was a lawyer who sometimes took cases for free when people really needed help. She called him right there in the break room, and he agreed to meet me that evening at a coffee shop near his office. Marcus turned out to be this tall guy in his 30s who looked way too tired but seemed really interested in my case. He went through the lawsuit page by page, making notes and shaking his head at some of Frank's claims. "Most of this is garbage," he said, pointing to the list of items. He explained that receipts and bank statements would prove I bought everything myself, but Max was more complicated since I didn't have official adoption papers from the rescue organization. That night, I tore through my email looking for anything from when I first got Max 4 years ago. I finally found the adoption confirmation email from the rescue group. Plus, I had every single vet bill saved, which added up to over $3,000. Jessica helped me organize everything into a binder, while Max watched from his bed, tail tucked and ears flat, like he knew something bad was happening. 3 days later, my work phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Frank, the only number he still had for me. "Tom Brennan still wants that mutt. Drop the dog off and I'll drop the lawsuit. You have 48 hours. I screenshot it immediately and sent it to Marcus. He called me within 5 minutes and told me to come to his office first thing in the morning. Marcus filed our response to the lawsuit that same day and started paperwork for a restraining order based on the threatening text. He explained that Frank's claim on Max was especially weak since I could prove I'd been the only one taking care of him and paying for everything for 4 years. A week later, I took Max to his regular vet appointment and explained the situation to Dr. Peterson. She was furious about the whole thing and wrote up a notarized letter right there confirming I was listed as Max's sole owner on every medical record since his adoption. adoption. She mentioned Max seemed really stressed lately, probably picking up on all my anxiety about the lawsuit. That evening, Jessica sat me down and suggested I stay with her permanently instead of just crashing temporarily. We worked out a real roommate agreement with rent and everything, which Marcus said would help show the court I had stable housing and wasn't some irresponsible person who couldn't take care of a dog. Max had already claimed a corner of her backyard as his favorite bathroom spot and seemed happy enough there, though he still followed me from room to room like he was afraid I might disappear. The next few days felt almost normal until my phone rang with a blocked number while I was making breakfast. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. My mom's voice came through broken with sobs, saying Frank was getting worse since I left and stopped paying for things. She kept repeating that he was taking it out on her, throwing things and screaming about the money I used to contribute. I grabbed my other phone and started recording like Marcus had told me to do with any contact from them. She begged me to just give him something, anything to make him stop, but I stayed quiet and let her talk while the recording captured everything. After she hung up, I sent the file to Marcus, who said it was perfect evidence of their harassment pattern. 2 weeks later, I was at my desk when Linda rushed over saying some guy was in the lobby demanding to see me about a dog. My stomach dropped as I heard shouting from downstairs about how he'd already paid $200 and wanted what was his. Security was trying to calm Tom down, but he kept getting louder, waving some paper around and yelling my name. Linda grabbed my arm and pulled me into her office while calling building security to handle it. Max was under my desk and I scooped him up, both of us shaking as we heard Tom's voice getting closer to the elevators. The security guards managed to get him out, but not before he screamed that Frank had promised him the dog and he'd be back. Linda immediately called HR and filed a report while I sat there trying to breathe normally again. Marcus jumped on it right away, filing for an emergency restraining order against both Frank and Tom. He argued they were working together to harass me, and the judge agreed to a temporary order. The hearing would be in 3 weeks, but at least I had some protection for now. Jessica helped me install a Ring doorbell that same night, and I started changing my route to work every day. I never walked Max the same way twice, and every car that slowed down made my heart pound. Even going to the grocery store felt dangerous, because I kept expecting to see Frank or Tom around every corner. The therapy sessions I'd started after moving out were the only thing keeping me together at this point. During one session, I broke down realizing this was the first time I'd ever really stood up to Frank. The therapist helped me see how he'd been controlling and taking my money since I was a kid. 3 weeks later at the restraining order hearing, Frank showed up with some cheap lawyer from a strip mall. He claimed he was the victim and pulled out a handwritten bill of sale from Max, dated the day before I moved out. The paper supposedly had Tom's signature on it, but Marcus immediately pointed out the obvious problem. He told the judge that Tom's harassment at my workplace proved he didn't think he owned the dog yet. The judge looked skeptical of Frank's whole story, but said she needed more time to review everything. She scheduled another hearing and extended the temporary restraining order, which was something at least. That night, Mom texted from someone else's phone with a warning that Frank had found out where I worked. She said he was planning something and begged me to be careful before the number blocked me. I showed the message to campus security the next morning, and they gave me permission to work from home. Linda was completely supportive and set up daily video calls to make sure I was doing okay. Working from Jessica's kitchen table became my new normal for the next month, while Max stayed glued to my side. He could sense how tense I was and wouldn't leave me alone for even a minute. One afternoon, while looking for old tax documents, I found my high school diary in a box I'd grabbed when moving out. The pages were full of Frank's thefts and manipulations going back years and years. There were entries about him taking my birthday money, selling my bike, demanding my part-time job earnings for bills. I photographed every single page and sent them to Marcus, who said this was exactly what we needed. He said it showed a clear pattern of financial abuse and control that would help our case. 2 days later, Marcus called me while I was at work and told me Frank's lawyer had sent over a settlement offer. I put him on speaker and closed my office door while he read through the document. Frank wanted me to drop the restraining order, return Max plus $2,000 worth of furniture, and then he'd drop the lawsuit. Marcus actually laughed out loud when he got to the part about the furniture. He told me he'd already sent back a counteroffer saying Frank drops everything and pays my legal fees. I knew Frank would never agree to that, but Marcus said it was worth putting on record. The next Saturday, I was at the grocery store loading bags into my car when I saw Tom walking across the parking lot toward me. My heart started pounding and I immediately grabbed my phone while Max started barking from inside the car. Tom got right up in my face saying Frank had promised him that dog and he wanted either his money back or the dog. I backed toward the store entrance while dialing 911 and told the operator a man was threatening me in the parking lot. Tom kept following me, getting louder about how I'd stolen his property and Frank had every right to sell that dog. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up and the officers separated us to get our stories. Tom admitted to the officers that he'd paid Frank $200 but couldn't explain why he'd pay for a dog that wasn't Frank's to sell. The officers told him about the restraining order and warned him not to contact me or come near me again. Tom stomped back to his truck yelling that this wasn't over and he'd get what was owed to him one way or another. After that encounter, I couldn't sleep properly for weeks. Every notification on my phone made my heart race, thinking it might be Frank or Tom trying something new. I started checking the doorbell app constantly, sometimes 20 or 30 times a day just to make sure nobody was outside. Max picked up on my anxiety and started sleeping on the bed instead of his dog bed, his ears perking up at every sound. Jessica noticed how jumpy I'd gotten and installed extra locks